To the Keeping It Real with KC podcast. I, of course, am your host, KC Phoenix, and I'm turning my Do Not Disturb on my phone. I totally forgot about it. So, yeah, here we are. Before I go any further, KIRWKC.com, main podcasting platform. This podcast is carried on Apple, Spotify, Google, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Overcast, Bullhorn, Amazon Music, Audible, and several other podcasting platforms. Please feel free to listen to this podcast on whatever platform is most convenient for you. KIRWKC on all the social media platforms. Okay, so here we are with another news story. And this was a little bit weird because I'm like, okay, how did this happen again? You would think that they would have people patrolling the park or something. I mean, we pay all this money to maintain these parks. So one would think we would have a little bit of a patrol happening to make sure stuff like this doesn't happen. But whatever, I digress. So, man's foot found with poems and cash in the car at Yellowstone. And it says, warning, very hot water. It says, be careful. A man's foot found floating in a hot pool at Yellowstone National Park was found along with hundreds of dollars in cash and some handwritten poems. The cash and poems were found in the missing man's car. Rangers stumbled upon the foot still inside the 8.5 size black shoe in the Abyss Pool, August 16, 2022. This after a park visitor reported a man's foot found to the tour driver. Geologists were unable to find any significant remains, but fatty deposits were found floating to the surface over time, according to documents. It says investigators were able to identify the man of the foot as 70-year-old Han Rowe of Los Angeles. Whatever happened to Rowe was determined to have taken place on the morning of July 31st. However, there were no witnesses. Foul play was not suspected regarding the man's foot found, according to an earlier statement. Investigators gathered evidence and interviewed witnesses at the scene and found there were 3 unaccounted for vehicles left in the parking lot. 2 of the vehicles were claimed by their people within an hour, and the last, the Kia Niro SUV that belonged to Rowe. Officials used Google Translate to read through Rowe's poems, but found no evidence of a suicide note. Using the driver's license from his wallet, it was determined that Rowe stayed for one night at the Canyon Lodge about an hour away in the West Thumb Geyser Basin. Visitors are reminded to stay on boardwalks and trails in the thermal areas and exercise extreme caution around thermal features. Officials wrote at the time, the ground is hydrothermal. In hydrothermal areas is fragile and thin, and there is scalding water just below the surface. The Abyss Pulley is over 50 feet deep it says one of Yellowstone's, that's a typo, one of Yellowstone's deepest, with a shockingly high temperature, of around 140 degrees Fahrenheit. Yeah, that is hot. In the documents, officials said that no other information was available. Be careful on your adventures, y'all. Okay, so, yeah, it seems like he just got close and then fell in. Maybe he slipped, fall, whatever. Something happened, which is why they were saying stay on the walkways and everything else. Don't go too close to the geysers. But yeah, it's a sad situation. I'm curious what the poems were. Like, what were the poems about? I'm very, very curious about that. But I guess we don't really have a way to find out. Maybe we do. I could do some deep diving and see if there were any other news articles or something like that. But I doubt it. So, yeah, I just thought the story was interesting, so I wanted to cover it. If you happen to go to Yellowstone Park, please be careful and stuff. Don't get too close to the geysers. Because, I mean, especially with technology today, we do have zoom-in cameras and things like that. So, you know. All right, KIRWKC.com, main podcasting platform. Podcast carried on Apple, Spotify, Google, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Overcast, Bullhorn, Amazon Music, Audible, and several other podcasting platforms. Please feel free to listen to this podcast on whatever platform is most convenient for you. KIRWKC on all the social media platforms. Till next time, be blessed.